Hello and good afternoon. On behalf of UNM-Taos, welcome to the Public Candidate Forum, where we will have the opportunity to meet and have a conversation with a candidate for the UNM-Taos Chancellor, Dr. Mary Gutierrez. A few Zoom housekeeping announcements before we get started. If we can ask folks to put your microphones on mute to make sure we're able to hear Dr. Gutierrez's responses. And we also invite and encourage you to turn on your camera so she has the opportunity to see folks that she's speaking with. We do want to let folks know that we are recording today's session. So if you prefer to not have your video or audio be recorded, you are welcome to keep your video turned off. Currently, we have the chat set so that you can send a message to me as the host, Anita Bringas. We encourage you to type in your questions. I will be moderating the Q&A with Dr. Gutierrez. But first, I'd like to turn it over to the chair of the UNM-Taos Chancellor Search Advisory Committee, Dr. James Malm.
Hello, thank you, Anita. Welcome, one and all, as the chair of the Search Advisory Committee for the UNM-Taos Chancellor Search. Please allow me to introduce Dr. Mary Gutierrez, and she will give us an opening statement, and then we will open it up for questions and a great conversation. Please, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone for being here today. Thank you for spending an hour of your time with me and giving us the chance to get to know each other. I flew up on, let me backtrack. I live in California, and I flew up on Friday evening so that I could have the chance to spend Saturday and Sunday here in Taos, just familiarizing myself with the area, driving around, getting to see things, getting to get out and about and walk around in the community and really start to get a feel for this place. And it's been really lovely doing that. And speaking of this place, I think it would be really important for me to engage a practice that happens at UNM of land acknowledgement. UNM-Taos is built on the land that was the original land of the Taos Pueblo, a sovereign nation that has a very deep connection to its land. And in acknowledging the land, we want to also honor those people who have been for generations stewards of this land. I grew up in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I am the child of educators. My mom taught kindergarten at White Sands, and my dad taught engineering at New Mexico State University. And growing up in the home of educators, I would say that defined my experience growing up. In evenings, we would be sitting around the dinner table listening to my mom's stories about her kindergartners. And on holidays and sometimes on weekends, my father's graduate students would be at our house. They typically were international students or students who were very far from home. And that gave me an opportunity to learn about parts of the world that I had no knowledge of. But to more importantly, I think, hear about their experiences in their home countries and the experiences that they were having as they had come to the US to go to school. When I went to college myself, although I had grown up around education, I didn't really have an intention to be an educator. It took me about 4 different majors before I landed on something that really connected with me. And as I chose to be an English major, I got practical and said, well, if I'm going to be an English major, I probably need to get a teaching credential. And so I started taking my education courses. And the first course I took had me in my sophomore year working in a high school classroom, and my cooperating teacher asked me to teach spelling and vocabulary. And up until that point, my concept of teaching was really very much focused on the teacher and the content, and that experience transformed my perception so that I understood that teaching is really about students and about the learning environment. and creating an environment in which students are more likely to discover things on their own, to learn on their own, and to empower themselves with education. And I loved doing that work. I understood that my role as a teacher was to take ownership for my students' learning, to be able to understand what their experience was well enough to make adjustments to help them learn. But that my responsibility was to understand what was happening in my classroom, to make those adjustments, and to take ownership for the outcome. And I loved doing that work. And I was also frustrated when I saw the students who had been successful in my class leave my class and face barrier after barrier after barrier. And it was really that seeing that kind of that repeated barriers that students were facing that drew me outside of the classroom and into administration to work with other people to really identify those barriers, take ownership for those barriers, and remove them. Because that was the only way that students would really meet with the full potential that they brought, but also the potential that education can provide. And so that is the work that I have done throughout my career, is to really identify those barriers, to take ownership for those barriers, and to remove and dismantle them from the system of higher education. And it's that work that really brings me here to UNM-Taos, because I see that in UNM-Taos, there's a strong commitment to removing those barriers as well. And we can think of all kinds of barriers that students face in education. And it really does take all of us working together to identify those barriers, to take responsibility for them and remove them. And so that's the work that I'm really interested in doing with you at UNM-Taos, so that our students and our communities can really be empowered by their own potential and the promise that education brings.
Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. We have several familiar faces on this session, as we did for our branch campus session. Although I do want to recognize and acknowledge that we have two members of our county commission that have joined us today, Darlene Hill and Anjanette Brush. So good afternoon, ladies, and welcome. For those of you that missed the announcement when we first started, you are welcome and invited to submit any questions that you might have via the chat to me as the host, and I'll be moderating the Q&A with Dr. Gutierrez. There were a few questions that were submitted that we did not get to. Our time ran short at our last session. So I'll cycle back to those while we're waiting for folks to submit questions. What are your long-term goals for UNM-Taos? That is 10 years or so down the road.
Excellent. So I think immediate goals certainly involve the return to work and to repopulating the campus in a way that is safe and really is bringing people back on board and students back on board into face-to-face learning. I think providing clarity about that and providing clarity and clear direction will help everybody be successful in the fall. I know that people are ready to come back to working in a face-to-face environment, teaching and learning in that face-to-face environment. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity. One of the really early responsibilities of the chancellor will be developing, leading the process to develop a strategic plan. And that strategic plan really should be orienting the work of the college for the next 5 years. To me, it's important that that strategic plan have really broad inclusion in the process of developing the plan, that it really respond to community needs, to the aspirations of Taos, of the pueblos, of the college campus, and be responding to the emerging workforce needs, because I think that workforce is something that is always emerging. There have certainly been many changes that have happened during COVID that give us a sense of here's some opportunities and directions that we could be pursuing. Some of the things that I see as possible outcomes would be increased enrollment, certainly increased graduation and retention, which are already goals, I think, of the college. I think that clearer sense of what the partnership with K-12 looks like, because I think that there's the opportunity to create among elementary school students the sense that I'm going to be a Lobo. maybe I'm a little Lobo right now, and I'm going to be, when I finish 12th grade, I'm going to be a Lobo at UNM-Taos, and I'll either be entering into the workforce or I'll be continuing on to Albuquerque to complete a 4-year degree. Those are some opportunities. I also think that UNM-Taos is a critical partner to the workforce development in Taos and the greater area. And I think it's really important that that particular vision be something that is developed in partnership. I think that what's very, very clear to me is that there are some really exciting ideas that are happening right now. The Hive, I think, has some really amazing foresight and opportunity. And I think that there's a lot that's happening in Taos that can't happen without the partnership of UNM-Taos. And I don't think that UNM-Taos can be everything that it has the potential to be if it's working in isolation from workforce and from community partners in Taos. So what I just said to you is I'm not telling you exactly what will happen in 5 to 10 years, but I'm telling you how it happens. It happens by planning together, investing together, prioritizing together, and making all of those decisions very strategically together, because I think that that's how we can better serve the community and the students.
Thank you so much for your response, Dr. Gutierrez. Before we get on to the next question, I want to also recognize that we have District Attorney Marcus Montoya with us this afternoon. So thank you, Mr. Montoya, for joining us today. I think your response to that question was there was a lot there, and I think we could spend the rest of the afternoon talking
Yes.
about partnerships with K-12 and what that means for workforce and dual enrollment. Can you speak a little bit more to the partnership with area high schools, with K-12, even as far as with pre-K? We talk a lot about college to career and now cradle to career throughout the state. So specifically, what ideas you have about encouraging local high school graduates from northern New Mexico to attend UNM-Taos, and or any other specific ideas or philosophies you have around partnering with the K-12 school system?
Yeah, so I'll share with you just a little bit about one of the most successful programs that I ever developed and led myself in terms of a college and K-12 partnership, was really working with students in a developmental English class that I was teaching. So these were students who came to college with some work that we wanted to do to get them ready to really be successful at the transfer level. These students were reading a book called Lives on the Boundary that was a study of American public education. And this was a class that had a very significant service learning component to it. And these students who had been told for years that they would not be college material were working as what we called college buddies with kindergarten students. They were really enriching the learning experience for kindergartners because the teacher was very deliberate about planning activities for that particular day that really relied on a college student providing hands-on support for the learning that the kindergartner was doing. Things like measuring the circumference of a pumpkin, predicting how many seeds would be in a pumpkin when we cut it open, guessing how much the pumpkin would weigh. So a lot of hands-on math skills that every individual student in that class was able to do because they had a college partner there with them. And what happened when my students were coming away from that classroom was they had a boost in confidence because they were really valued and important and actually loved by their kindergartners. The kindergartners were getting just a really enriched learning environment. But my students also were reading critiques of public education, and they were observing things about the kindergartners that were really providing evidence for them in the papers that they were writing about public education. So there was a real big win-win there. But what was also happening when I talk about Little Lobos is there's the opportunity for those young children to begin to see that they can go to college. They know somebody who goes to that college, and it starts to be something that sticks with them. I think that there's the opportunity to build that rich relationship between K-12 and the college to really begin to partition the experiences that students and the exposure that students have to college at different parts of their experience in K-12. Certainly we can be doing that very early exposure, thinking about what kind of planning we're doing when a student is in middle school and what kind of support we're doing to prepare them to expect to be in dual enrollment by the time they're in 11th and 12th grade. So that real intentionality in how we're interfacing with K-12 is a really important opportunity. So that by the time they are getting into 11th and 12th grade, then coming to the college should be something that's really different and distinct and special, so that college doesn't look like just an extension of high school, although we know that when it is an extension of high school, students are set up for success. But we also know that students want that to be special and different. So there's a real important opportunity there.
Thank you so much. We talk a lot about college going culture in the region, northern New Mexico, specifically Taos and the Enchanted Circle. So I appreciate your comments and responses there. And as we, UNM-Taos, we have our early child care center, kids campus, that even the little ones, 0 through 3, as they're coming in, we already are calling them logos, and really trying to build that college going culture. And many of the community members that are on the call have been partners in that work, particularly Lisa O'Brien, who's just joined us. She's the executive director of our Taos Community Foundation, is a staunch advocate for that as well. So thank you for that. So I'd like to cycle back shortly to, you mentioned several things about workforce development, economic development. There's a lot of conversations happening in the community about diversification of the economy, so we're not so reliant on tourism. We'll cycle back to that, but first I'd like to get to a question that's come through from one of our participants, which is, can you tell us how you work with people to create or foster diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace? This has come up previously, so obviously it's a very it's a priority for a campus and the community.
Yes. So let's talk about each of those 3 things, because I think that they're really, we talk about them together, but they are individual things themselves. So diversity is really acknowledging who we have in our community and ensuring that we are not only understanding that we have a diverse community, but we're really tapping into the power of a diverse community, that we are recognizing and appreciating the diverse gifts, talents, riches, experiences that all of the members of our community have, and making sure when we're talking about inclusion that all of those are really valued and engaged in the community that we have. I think that our community really needs to visibly represent the diversity that we have in our community. And what this means, just in very practical senses, is that the images that we have on the website or in the buildings really needs to represent the members of our community, that the activities that we engage in, that the food that we serve on campus, that the events that we host on campus really needs to represent and reflect the diversity of our community. In terms of having a diverse faculty, staff, and administrative group, it really means building a culture that engages, respects, and includes the input of all of the members of our community, and really recognizes and reflects what they're bringing and what they need from us as well. That begins to create a climate that is inclusive. And I think that only when you have an inclusive environment are you really able to tap into the strengths of a diverse environment. I think it means that we show that we want and engage differences of opinion, differences of experience, diversity of views, and that we are making sure that the decisions that we are reaching are inclusive in their process, so that all of those perspectives are around the table, heard and valued, and really included in decision-making processes. And I think that institutions of higher education only have a hope of really achieving equity, and before I go into, by being both diverse and inclusive. And when I'm talking about equity, I'm particularly thinking about places where we see gaps, and understanding that what we need to do to close those gaps is not the same thing for every person involved. It may be that, well, certainly during COVID, it wasn't that every student needed to have a laptop. because some students already had laptops. But if we're trying to close gaps in terms of performance during COVID, it meant not only providing laptops, but providing quiet spaces, providing internet connection, providing time and space for students to be students if we were going to accomplish any type of equitable outcome. So for us to be producing equity, we really have to have those diverse perspectives around the table. We have to be including them in decision making and helping us understand our work. And only then are we really able to accomplish any kind of equity in terms of serving our students.
Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. In your research preparing for our visit today, I know that you researched our strategic plan and our website and a lot of other materials. So we have a question posed, which is, what is something that UNM-Taos is currently doing that impresses you?
Well, I think that actually, in terms of what I have been learning about UNM-Taos, I think UNM-Taos is quiet in some ways, because I think that, you know, when I ask questions, I'm just like so impressed with some of the things that I'm learning. In some of their recent press releases, learning about the Hive. The Hive is very, very innovative. The concept for the new buildings that are going on, again, very, very innovative. I'm very excited that the institution is working on guided pathways, and that in 2015, the math department started to work with Alex, which is an opportunity to try to find ways to get students to transfer level math very early on. My sense is that you understand that that we need to have individual responses and individual supports for students, because we certainly understand best practices for groups of students, but we also understand that everyone's an individual, and sometimes the things that students need to kind of get from where they are to where they need to be may be an individual intervention. So there's so much stuff that I think that UNM-Taos is doing. I think that you have focused on increasing enrollment, increasing success. You have now targeted retention and graduation rates. And I think that you have already seen the efforts of your work in terms of making those advancements. So those are just a handful of things that come to mind for me.
Thank you. So this you addressed in a previous, excuse me, a previous meeting, but I think it's worthwhile for the community members that are joining us today to hear your response. And I'm going to expand it a little bit. So the question is, how much, if you could talk about your experience working with legislators on a state level to advocate for branch campuses. I'd like to expand that to include working with local government as well, particularly town and county representatives.
Certainly, thank you. So I'll talk first about the working with the state level legislatures, and in California, because California is so large, the opportunity to work with legislatures is very often very organized. So there are days that community colleges will go and lobby in Sacramento to help our legislators understand the work and the needs of community colleges. More recently, we have had Zoom meetings to do that kind of work. And I have engaged in those meetings with our legislators and with other folks who are interested in advocating on behalf of community colleges as well, most notably the faculty unions. And so I've had an opportunity to have some of those conversations. And the state of Washington, where I was working with students who were lobbying, our students were often going to Olympia to lobby on behalf of bills that they had been doing research and work on, which gave me a really lovely opportunity because our students would have appointments with their elected officials. They would talk about the bill that they were working on, and it gave me an opportunity to talk about community colleges and the fact that they were talking with dual enrollment students, 11th and 12th graders who were extremely knowledgeable about the bills that they were there to speak on and advocate for. So it was really the best case scenario because the legislators were seeing the evidence of the work of community colleges as they were talking with these very informed students. In my current position, I am I'm the Vice President of Instruction and work to support a lot of our CTE programs, our career technical education programs, all of which have advisories. And when I started my position, I met with the advisories for many of our CTE programs. The one I'm going to talk with you about is business. And when I was in my first business advisory program, this is an opportunity for faculty and staff who work with our business programs to meet with local business partners. I heard the seeds of an idea that I thought was very interesting. In the region that I work in, most of tech is on the west side of the bay, over on a peninsula that starts with San Francisco, ends with San Jose, generally referred to as the Silicon Valley. But the east side of the bay doesn't have as much tech. There's a little bit that's starting to develop in Oakland, but further inland where I live and work, the tech industry really hasn't moved into that area, despite the fact that there's a lower cost of living there, and that many of the tech workers who have been commuting to the other side of the bay, that's where they're living. So it seems like to a lot of these folks in this business advisory meeting that there was the opportunity to do some work around attracting more business related to tech to this side of the bay. And I advocated for my college's engagement in that project with my president. And now Diablo Valley College is the host of the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative, which has as a goal to attract more tech into this side of the bay. For that work, we have really had to partner with mayors of the local communities. And so there are 3 mayors who are also now part of the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative. And it really has been networking, slow conversations, and a lot of support to continue to move that work along.
That was a great segue to the next question that came into the chat, excuse me, which is if you can speak to workforce development and pivoting in demand local high wage career pathways, for example, career technical education, or you mentioned earlier the UNM-Taos Hive, non-credit options, etc. So if there's anything you'd like to expand in those areas, please do.
Can you say that question?
Excuse me. Yes, I have a tickle in my throat. If you could speak to workforce development and pivoting in demand local high wage career pathways, for example, in areas such as career technical education through the UNM-Taos Hive or through non-credit options.
Okay, great. So I can talk specifically about some work that I've done to support digital marketing. When I started at my current institution, I did bring in some knowledge of digital marketing, and I had worked with an education startup called Greenfig that has really moved into the digital marketing area. And the reason that they've done that is because the demand for digital marketing has far outstripped the availability of digital marketers. Most people working in marketing, started in print and did not have a real sense of how to move what they knew about print marketing into the digital format. And the educational opportunities had not kept up with the need for digital marketers or expertise around digital marketing. I supported our faculty in building out what was essentially a boot camp. So there's so many people who were working in marketing that just needed 1 or 2 classes to really skill up and start earning more wages and fill this demand. And so we put together a digital marketing certificate that we were able to launch very quickly. We were teaching this in short courses that were intense courses, so still 3-unit courses that were taught in an 8-week period. And students were able to complete a full digital marketing certificate within 1 year. So it was a very alternate format. It was offered in a way that was very similar to what was being offered, for $10,000 if you're working with Udacity, Coursera, or some of the other startups that have moved into that space. But additionally, I'm thinking about work that we have done at the institution to pivot into non-credit coursework as well, partly because it allows us to get courses to students very quickly at an affordable rate that really can give them an edge. Sometimes what will happen is they'll take that one non-credit course, they will be able to make some quick advancements in their career. Or sometimes what will happen is that one experience was such a change for them in a favorable manner that then they will start to take some credit courses. And I think that there's a real interesting potential there for non-credit to transition into credit coursework, particularly in workforce development.
Excellent. And can you talk a bit about your experience in working with community stakeholders, public-private partnerships, other institutions of higher education to identify the needs of the community, be they in the in-demand workforce areas or other community needs, to identify them and then to address those needs?
Certainly. So recently in California, cannabis has become legalized, and there's been this emergence of certain aspects of the economy related to cannabis that hasn't been consistent across the board. So there are these gaps in terms of the industry as it's developing in California, and there are some really important opportunities that really can change outcomes for certain members of the community. The state has a lot of grants, but to be able to pursue one of these grants, you have to be able to put together a business plan. And not all of the folks who are interested in getting into the industry who really have the opportunity to thrive in that industry have the prior experience or preparation to write a business plan. So the work that we're doing at my institution is regional work. It's being informed by what we are learning about the emergence of this industry in the state. Looking at, we're partnering with regional workforce development experts and figuring out where we really can fit into the solution. One of the strengths of my current institution is entrepreneurship and business. And so what we have started doing is providing these non-credit business plan courses to really make sure that the folks who are getting those grants are people who really need them, not people who are already well established as people who are already very established entrepreneurs who don't necessarily need this small startup grant that can help propel them into this industry. We're also figuring out what some of those other gaps are in the industry as it's developing and making sure that we are aligning our institutional strengths with the needs in that industry to be able to meet those gaps. The potential revenue for the state is huge and for our region is huge. And as importantly, for individuals who live in our service area to be able to become part of that industry can be life-changing.
Thank you. In Change Leadership in Higher Education, Jeffrey Buller argues that the traditional strategic plan process has failed higher education institutions, and that the more productive pursuit for an institution is to create a culture of innovation and recognize the distributed organizational nature of higher education institutions so that these institutions can learn to be agile and fluid. How would you lead, nurture, and advance culture of innovation at UNM-Taos?
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating question. So I'm intrigued in that, and that's a conversation I would be really interested in engaging in a little bit more, because I think that part of what I would hope for is both, that we can strategically plan and that we can maintain a culture of innovation, and I think it's absolutely critical for that. One of the ways that I think that we can support a culture of innovation is by continuing to observe the ways that we are not working and being open to acknowledging the failures that we have, the places that our students are facing barriers, the roadblocks to progress, or the missed opportunities that we continue to miss. And that as we are secure with identifying those and calling those things out and saying, how do we change that? I think that is what creates not just the culture of innovation, but the responsibility of innovation. I think that innovation is critical if we are going to change outcomes. We cannot change outcomes without changing ourselves and without being open to seeing the things that we are not doing successfully. So my hope is that, and to be really specific, ways that I have seen cultures of innovation work is one, by being open to hearing new ideas, because there are certainly cultures where that's just not permissible. You know, that because the response is this is how we've always done things. And that's just not a good enough answer in my book. So I think first of all, wanting to hear ideas, creating a space for ideas. Some institutions have innovation funds that they are very intentional about funding new ideas to help create that culture of innovation. I think taking, I have loved working in institutions where the answer was yes, let's figure out how, rather than no. And I have appreciated being in those places myself. And I think that as chancellor, I have to be thinking about both of these things. Yes, I want a culture of yes, and I also need to know that this is going to work. What is that going to look like? I think we also have to be okay with knowing that not everything is going to work. When you innovate, it's not all going to be successful. So we look for some early indicators that something is working or is not to inform our decision to pursue, to continue with an idea. But again, I want to reiterate that innovation is critical if we are going to achieve different outcomes. So innovation must be happening.
Absolutely, thank you. So you spoke to some of the things that UNM-Taos is doing that impressed you. So on the flip side of that, there's a staff member that is asking, is there a program or degree that you would like to see UNM-Taos start to offer that is not currently available?
Sure. So I'll talk with you about a concept of development that I'm interested in, and I'll explain to you why I have this concept. I think that part of what we want to do anytime that we develop a new degree or certificate is we want to make sure not only that it's going to be that there's a place that students are going when they've completed it, and that the certificate or the degree has value in terms of getting them to that place. But we also want to know that we are going to be able to, that we have enough students for us to be able to pursue that track. It's really important. Enough students on one end, or we can get enough students. And we also need to know that where they're going, there's going to be that payoff for them, that the certificate is meaningful and useful, and it's going to change outcomes for them. I think that there's potential in terms of one of I think the really exciting opportunities for students who are living in Taos right now is that many jobs now can be a 100% remote workplace, and that creates opportunities for students. I've seen that there have been a lot of development of degrees that really can be effectively performed fully online. I look at the digital marketing work that you're doing, that the digital marketing, digital art, IT, business analytics, all of these have some aspects in common. And I think that if we are able to look for opportunities in the workforce where there's a big demand, a big need, and we have some themes in common here, what that allows us to do is to provide some courses across all of these degrees or certificates that are in common. And then that ensures us a really significant enrollment in these courses, so that as they start to differentiate and have some courses that are unique for each of these tracks, we know at least that we've had very strong full enrollment in this base. It gives students a broad exposure to those career fields, and it helps them select things that really are going to be good fits for them. So I think that there's some opportunity there that we could explore to really look for holes in that, opportunities or needs in that, and to think about how we are building that so that it's really sustainable.
Excellent, thank you. So just to do a quick time check, we're at 3:40. So we've got about 20 more minutes until our conclusion at 4 o'clock. I'll let you take a pause and get a sip of water. And I'd like to invite our attendees. We're a relatively small group. So if anybody wanted to unmute their microphone and pose a question directly to Dr. Gutierrez, you're welcome to do so. And in the meantime, we'll go ahead and on to the next question. If you could speak to your experience with working with students and the community in developing internships and apprenticeships.
Yes, really, really important. Part of when I was talking about educational experiences that I think really have the potential to change lives, I think those are highly contextualized learning environments where students have the opportunity to learn and apply. I think that particularly in Taos, as we're thinking about students who, for whom coming to college means the opportunity to learn and earn, the internships can be really an important transition for them into the workforce, and can even be opportunities for them to be earning money in the career field that they hope to be going into as they're advancing in their degrees. I think it's very important to be working with beginning with the local community in terms of preparing for the internship needs that they have and preparing them to work with interns, because I think that it takes both of those things for us to be really successful. Helping our community partners understand this is, talk with us about what your student needs as they're coming in to be successful as an intern. Let us make sure that they are doing that. And let us share with you some things that we have learned about what will help your intern be successful. Here are some things that you can do to set them up to be successful, rather than not providing that network, that environment, or that support that really sets them up to come into your workplace and be productive for you. Understanding that this is something that may take some time. We're going to build this over time. We're going to begin to build this internship program so that we are iterating it, learning from it, and then really building this sustainable partnership in partnership with the community. I think there's also the opportunity for us to build online internship opportunities. In my current position, I work with an organization called Year Up. And what Year Up does is it works with students who are very often first generation students who are interested in getting into tech. It prepares them in, again, this very intense manner, but it is also partnering and providing internships in tech that sometimes are producing jobs for the same students who have interned with them. So those online internships have also worked during COVID for our students. These used to be in-person internships. We've transitioned them to online internships. And I think that there's a lot of potential for us to explore that for students who are coming to UNM-Taos, who are interested in getting to some of those sectors.
Thank you. We have a lot of really good questions coming in.
Okay.
Just as we're starting to run out on time, so we'll try to get through as many as possible. So this is a question from a faculty member. What excites you most about the prospect of being chancellor at UNM-Taos? And what do you see as the biggest potential challenge?
Okay. I think that what excites me most, I'll tell you a couple of things that I just think are ideal about this position, and about UNM-Taos, really, because it's such a focused community. We know who our partners are. We know who our K-12 partners are, who our workforce partners are, who our transfer partners are, who our community partners are. And what that means is just the sense of real focus, the opportunity to bring people together to build partnership, and to agree on our priorities, to be able to move forward to serve the community and students effectively. I think that that's one thing that is just ideal about this position. Additionally, I am really excited about the opportunity to work with a small institution. In my career, I've had the opportunity to work with a college that has served 500 students. I currently serve at an institution that serves 20,000 students. And during the time of COVID, I've spent a lot of time reflecting and thinking about what some of my most memorable, most satisfying, most exciting work experiences have been. And it's really when I've been able to work with a small team that had a very tight focus and a real drive to innovate and to serve students and to be holding itself responsible for producing equitable outcomes. And I see in UNM-Taos an institution that really meets those criteria, is very interested in equity, is small, and is ready to continue to do this work to move forward. That excites me. I continue, it's almost like every time I dig a little deeper into UNM-Taos, I see something exciting and something innovative that you're doing that I didn't read about or didn't see before. And that just, that actually inspires me. It makes me very excited to show up, to serve as your chancellor and to be your partner in this work. And my sense is that there is a lot of interest in this work. I've been inspired by how many people have shown up to these conversations, the real questions that people are asking, the way that there's just a lot of forthrightness in the questions that people are asking. And so if I'm listening to what you're telling me, the things that are going to be our biggest challenges are sometimes just the challenge of serving in an area that has a high level of poverty. I hear you, and I hear that that has been challenging and that will be challenging and something that we'll have to work together on to really be able to address. And the second thing that I hear is just that sometimes institutions have history, and we have to figure out how to move together, to work together, acknowledging the history and deciding that, we're going to serve our students, that we're either going to work through things that are difficult or put aside things that are difficult because we care about our students, and our students deserve that from us. So those are the things that you all are telling me are going to be our biggest challenges. But I think that those are our challenges, not just my challenges. And that's how I see the work, is our work.
So many times throughout today in the interviews leading up to today, you have mentioned your leadership style is centered around communication and particularly listening. And I think your last response really reflects that you have been doing so with us in your time. So thank you for that. I think we'll take two more questions from our participants and then leave you some time to make some closing statements if you like. So this workforce and economic development and economic diversity are really key topics on campus and the community. So this goes back to the question about workforce. In today's world, our nation is facing a crisis of having a reliable and trained workforce. Most importantly, we need people who can resolve conflict, communicate effectively, and work as part of a team. What steps would you take that our graduates are not only learning academic outcomes, but are also learning these vital social emotional skills? What are other key factors that support a healthy workforce?
Yes, what a great question. Thank you. To me, what this really points to is a sense that an education is intended, designed to create well-rounded people. And there are lots of ways that institutions can really advance that work. One of the ways that we do that is through institutional learning outcomes that really speak to all of those skills, that speak to critical thinking skills, that speak to communication skills, and that really value our ability to be effective in a diverse and inclusive workplace, where we have the opportunity to call attention to those skills. And I want to talk about one institution that I had the chance to work with that I think did really outstanding work in this. And the way that they did that is that they made those institutional learning outcomes something that every student was aware that they were working on. The course was essentially branded with institutional learning outcomes. A student could tell you what the institutional learning outcomes were because they weren't in educationese, they were just in normal speak. So a student knew that they were learning communication skills. But they also, because there was such transparency about those skills and such valuing of those skills, a student could tell you what they were learning about those skills. And to me, this is a really important way that we can be effective educators, is by telling students this is what we're working on right now. this is what we're going to be doing today. This is the skill you're learning, practicing, and working on, because we're giving them handles to know the strengths that they're building. And I think that when we have critical awareness about the skills and the knowledge that we're developing, we are also able to call on it and use it. So I love that question. I think that there's certainly other passports, other ways that people are very transparent about developing those other and really critical workforce skills that we could talk about. But that was one that really influenced me in the work that I saw that particular institution doing.
Thank you. Taos is an art destination, an outdoor recreation area, a ski town. How would you convey to the world that Taos is also an education destination and a college town?
Yes, so this is a new theme. This is what I was saying about every time I show up and dig a little deeper, I learn something new. And so the concept of Taos as a college town is something that I heard about for the first time today. And in terms of how we would help communicate that, I love the idea. And one of the things that I've talked a lot about today is that I think that very often students are our best voices in terms of helping potential students understand who we are and what our work is about. So I think that there's the opportunity to brand that. And I've seen some really nice hashtag work going on here, but the opportunity to brand that and to put those stories out in social media to begin to help that concept be understood. I also want to have awareness about being a college town means that you're building places for students to live. And I'm hearing that housing is something that we need to take into consideration. So I am really excited about building that idea of Taos as a college town, particularly for people who are already living here or who might be attending the college virtually. And I think it would be important for us to move forward with the community and developing the identity as a college town to make sure that we're really able to support that experience.
Excellent. So should you be the successful candidate, we'll have a lot more conversations about marketing and branding opportunities because there's a lot of them. So I would like to invite in these last couple of minutes, if Anjanette or Darlene would be willing to share with Dr. Gutierrez and our attendees today, what do you see as the key role of UNM-Taos in moving the community and the region forward? Or anything that you would like our candidate to know about the work that is happening in the community?
I will start by, if I may, thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. Thank you for your interest in this position. And as you can tell by those that are present, it is important to us as to who that individual will be. And so we thank you for your expertise you've shared with us. As a county commissioner, collaboration is really key to Taos County. And we see UNM, and I'm speaking for myself right now, but I can see Anjanette, our commissioner, Brush, smiling. So I know we're on. I'm okay by saying that the commission does. We pride ourselves in collaboration. We do believe that UNM is an important part of the community. And so going forward, what I see and what I would hope for is to have a continued collaboration, and certainly in areas of concern, such as what has been talked about today, the future of Taos County, the economy, the need for jobs, and what that looks like and what UNM can bring in that arena to help the locals, the community go forward. And so I just would like to say collaboration is really, really big for me. And so I hope to see that going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vigil. Commissioner Brush, did you have anything to add?
Sure. Well, one thing I'll add is that I agree with what Commissioner Vigil said. And thank you, Dr. Gutierrez, for being here and for being interested. I mean, you hit on a lot of things that are of interest to me and I think to the county's work. Namely, if we're going to, diversify our economy away from being a service and / tourism economy, we need a workforce. And UNM is a huge asset in this community and has already done great work in creating the pipeline of workers for various new areas. And you talked about, you answered questions about like identifying new industries, new opportunities that you might want to explore. You talked about things that are near and dear to my heart, like internships and apprenticeships and connecting with K through 12, and recognizing that a lot of our students are coming from a place of being impoverished. So I appreciate everything you said, and I look forward to seeing what UNM can continue to do to help diversify our workforce, because we're not going to be able to expand our economy or bring new and interesting, industries, whatever they are, in here if we don't have a workforce. And by the way, also a place for them to live. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate them. And best of luck in the process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Brush. So we'll leave a few moments for Dr. Gutierrez to make a closing statement. But before we do, I wanted to bring your attention to the chat, where I posted a link to the Chancellor's search page that is based at the Provost office at UNM Albuquerque. We do invite and encourage you to follow that link and fill out a feedback survey that will be reviewed by the Provost when considering all the candidates for our very key Chancellor position here at UNM-Taos. At that link, you'll also find information on other candidates and schedules for future forums. So please do check out that link. And with that, I'll leave the last few moments for our candidate, Dr. Gutierrez, to share any closing statement that she would like to share with us.
So I mostly want to close by just saying thank you so much for being here today. This forum, the previous forum, really showed to me that UNM-Taos is small but mighty, because you came here with a commitment to the institution and to the community, to the students, and to this area in terms of its healthy growth and development. And to me, that's what you were showing me is that this college is not alone, that they are an integral part of the success of this area. And it's important to me as a potential chancellor to know that there is a big team around this. And I just, again, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your concerns and your ideas, and for your support of the institution. It's critical, no matter who your chancellor is, that there's a very strong team working together to ensure the success of this community. So thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have spent this time with you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gutierrez. The pleasure is ours. We look forward to taking you on a campus tour. To those of you that were able to join us today, thank you so much for participating, and we wish you a pleasant afternoon. Thank you.